Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week.
I know people who shot in the body and it's come out the other side with large calibre bullets still sat around today. I know a kid gun put in his eye, trigger fired and beat with an ammo, still around today. I know a kid who got shot through the neck, the bullet went come out this side, where his friend's head and come out his mate's head here, and they're both still alive. You know, if you're not meant to go, I believe you're not meant to go. It's like myself, you know, I could be shot dead any time. I've realised that for years, but it's meant to happen, and that's the end of it. I'm prepared to face that. I know the stakes.
Salford, July 2015. Hundreds line the streets in silence. A white coffin, draped in red. A salute to a man both feared and admired. Paul Massey. Mr. Big was going home. Born and raised in Salford, Paul Massey wasn't always the man with headlines. In the early 80s, he was just another face on the terraces, a known Manchester United lad, proud and vocal, and, according to some, had strong links to the Red Army and intercity jibbers in its more lawless days. And many of Massey's generals were also linked to the Manchester United hooligans. These are the Salford Lads. This is what a well-known face from the criminal underworld had to say about Massey. You couldn't miss him. He had presence, even back then, not just in the clubs or on the doors, but on match days too. But Massey's world soon grew beyond football. From door security to full-blown organised crime, Salford became his turf, and the man once seen in United colours became something else entirely. Massey was dubbed Salford's Mr. Big by both police and press. In his world, intimidation was currency. But to locals, he was more than a gangster. Some saw him as a peacekeeper, others a protector. On the day of his funeral, Manchester United flags flew once more, a final tribute from the streets that made him. Feared, loved, respected. Paul Massey's story was more than Gangland. It was Salford's story, and it hasn't finished yet. Now I want to deep dive into the excellent book called Salford Lads. So we can get a real understanding of Massey and the Salford Lads, I will leave a link in the description if you wish to buy the book. If you are into true crime involving football lads, then this explosive book is a must-read. Let's get straight into it. The early days. In June 1985, Massey conspired with his friend Gary Mack to escape from Strangeways prison, where he was still on remand awaiting trial. On the evening of the breakout, Massey and his cellmate Harvey hid in a cupboard before officers locked the inmates in for the night. When the prison eventually fell silent, Massey and Harvey sawed through a bar in a fourth-floor room using a hacksaw that had been smuggled into the jail. They then tied bedsheets together and lowered themselves into the exercise yard. Mac, waiting outside the prison, began hurling a hook, which was attached to a rope, skywards, but it barely reached the top of the wall. "I can't effing reach, Paul. Can you hear me, mate? I can't effing reach." A patrolling prison dog heard the shouting and began to bark. Massey looked at Harvey and said, "He's effing useless, him. I bet the rope isn't even long enough. Let's go." As prison officers ran towards the sound of the excited dog, Massey and Harvey were seen sprinting towards a cell block. They managed to clamber onto a nearby roof, but there was nowhere for them to go. The guards pleaded with them to give themselves up, but they refused. They sat up there until the following morning and throughout the day. That evening, Massey was featured on the front page of the Manchester Evening News. A photograph depicted him climbing up a sloping roof while Harvey looked on. When other inmates became aware of Harvey and Massey's predicament, some showed their support, One went on hunger strike and others set fire to their cells. The failed escape bid was soon being represented by Massey and his followers as a protest against prison conditions. Eventually the prison governor agreed to listen to their grievances on the condition that Massey and Harvey climbed down from the roof. For a while, Massey was seen as something of a hero in strange ways, but his reputation suffered a crushing blow in the summer of 1986. One of Massey's associates at that time was a young eager villain named Lee Taberer. He had two brothers, Wayne and Gary. On the evening of June 18th, 1986, 23-year-old Wayne had arranged to drive his partner's 10-year-old sister back to her parents' home. After leaving the house, Wayne asked the child if she would like to go for a bit of a drive. Presumably feeling secure in the company of her big sister's boyfriend, the little girl agreed. Wayne stopped at an off-license where he purchased a large bottle of cider and unsuccessfully tried to get the girl to drink some. He then drove to a river, where he parked in a relatively secluded spot. The pair got out and sat on a grassed area where they watched the passing boats. Wayne finished the cider and chatted to the girl to put her at ease. Eventually the girl asked Wayne if she could go home. "Come here a minute," he replied, but she sensed that something was wrong, refused, and began to cry. Wayne ordered her to be quiet, but the terrified child got up and ran to the van. As she struggled to open the door, he wrapped both of his arms around her until she was still. He reassured the trembling girl that she wasn't in any danger, and told her to sit in the van so that he could take her home. They drove off, but the van got stuck in a culvert. For over half an hour, Wayne dug, pushed and pulled until the vehicle was eventually back on the road. Claiming to be physically exhausted, he told the child that he needed to rest. Then he locked the doors and pulled down his trousers and underpants. The girl was forced to kneel on a seat and ordered to remove her underwear. She was sobbing uncontrollably and eventually complied. It is far too distressing to describe what Wayne Taberer put that child through. In short, she was sexually assaulted, suffering bite marks on her buttocks and abrasions to her neck and torso. Thankfully, she was spared the indignity of being raped. Afterwards, Wayne told the girl to get off of his van because she was retching. After putting her underwear back on, the girl, who was still crying, fled from the van without her shoes. Initially, she ran to a petrol station, but it didn't appear to be open. The girl then saw a man and a woman walking a dog and sprinted towards them. As she reached the couple, who could see that she was extremely distressed, Wayne pulled up alongside her and ordered her to get back in the van. The girl pleaded with the man and woman to help her, and so they called the police. When Wayne was arrested later the same day, he initially denied any wrongdoing. However, the victim's evidence and that of other eyewitnesses ensured that he was charged with indecent assault, and he was remanded in custody to Strangeways Prison, pending trial. Massey, who was known to be an associate of Wayne's brother Lee, was both outraged and extremely embarrassed by the assault. In an effort to distance himself from Wayne, he told his fellow inmates that the first person to beat, stab, or harm Wayne would be handsomely rewarded. Fearing for his safety, Wayne asked to be put into protective custody where he remained until his trial. Due to the overwhelming evidence, he was eventually forced to plead guilty and received a meagre 40-month prison sentence. Lee refused to condemn or criticize his brother, yet despite this, Massey continued to associate with him. Amongst many of the Salford Lads, this was seen as reprehensible. Massey was rewriting the criminal code to suit his friends and himself, but then, don't all villains? Later the same year, Massey, Doyle and their co-defendants stood trial for the conspiracy, involving forged £20 notes, defrauding clearing banks, and using stolen credit cards and checkbooks throughout Europe. Massey was imprisoned for 5 years, and Doyle for 3. The other defendants were given lesser sentences. Little wonder Massey had little or no respect for the judicial system. 5 years for petty fraud, compared to Wayne Tabarrah being sentenced to just 3 years and 4 months for sexually assaulting a child. 12 weeks after being sentenced, Massey and another man were returned to court to face charges concerning the theft of the petrol. Both were sentenced to an additional 12 months. Massey believed that the authorities' pursuit of him was unjust, and he needed to remain defiant. He needed to show his tormentors and his followers that Paul Massey wasn't troubled by unwarranted intrusions into his life, and so he elected once more to do hard time. His disruptive behaviour resulted in him spending 2 years in solitary confinement. That did little to stem the deep feelings of hatred and loathing that Massey had for the system. With little or no human contact, solitary confinement is a corrosive environment for prisoners, to say the least. Many suffer mental health problems, and others ultimately take the easy way out using a bedsheet, rope, or a smuggled razor blade. Massey was determined that the system wouldn't break him, and told friends that his time in solitary confinement actually made him feel stronger. When the screw said, "Do this, do that," I did F all. I'm not bullshitting, I did nothing. They couldn't understand why they couldn't control me. I was in solitary confinement maybe 2 years, maybe a bit over. So, what happened then? I became very bitter against the system. They tried to break me, but instead of breaking me, they educated me. It definitely made me stronger. The most significant change in Massey's life had nothing to do with his grudge against authority or his loathing of the police. While serving part of his sentence at HMP Full Sutton near York, Massey had written to Stephen Lydiate's sister, a stunning blonde named Louise. He asked her if she would visit him. She agreed, and in time, a romance that was to last 30 years had blossomed. Everything Casual are now on Vinted. If you or the missus uses the Vinted app, then you can find our football casual lad brands such as Aquascutum, Barber, Hugo Boss, CP Company, but at a tiny fraction of the price. All authentic garms, nothing moody, just pre-loved clothing. So check out the Everything Casual shop on Vinted. Click on the link in the description for this video, or get yourself on Vinted and type in Everything Casual. Many of our pre-loved designer clothes are under 10 quid. Take a look for yourselves. Massey had first established himself as someone not to cross as a football hooligan in United's Red Army, then as the head of his own crew. His Salford Lads weren't a stringently hierarchical organisation like the Italian mafia, but a loose alliance of young criminals who, in the 90s, supplanted the once powerful quality street gang. Locals knew Massey as someone who lived by a code. Sure, he had trafficked party drugs for years, but he drew the line at heroin. His men plastered stickers on lampposts threatening, "Sell smack, get smacked." And yes, he was the man to see if you wanted a washing machine that had fallen off the back of a lorry. But he would also find money for the old lady whose flat had been broken into and cleaned out. When rival gangs feuded, it was often Massey, never the cops, who brokered peace. He befriended gangland figures in prison and didn't forget them on the outside. He would send Christmas cards with 50 quid included. On that summer evening in 2015, Massey had just returned from Winkup's holiday camp on the Irish Sea in North Wales. The escape wasn't as relaxing as he had hoped. One of his daughters, Kelly, called while he was away and remembers him being a little distant, drained and stressed. Massey carried 2 mobile phones that buzzed constantly with people asking for favours. Back in Salford, a gang war was unfolding and a few associates made the drive out to Winkup's to confer with Massey. Says Louise Lydiate, his partner of 3 decades and the mother of 2 of his 5 children. The crown was heavy in Salford. When we talk about Paul Massey, we also have to give his one-time right-hand man, Paul One Punch Doyle, and the Quality Street gang a shout-out too. Sat around a table in the club that night, on Wednesday, July 29th, 1981, were soon-to-be Salford, Mr. Big, Paul Massey, his close pal and former boxer-turned-doorman Paul Doyle, and a bunch of mates. Young, ambitious and ruthless, Massey and Doyle were then up-and-coming criminals. Having met in prison, on their release, they began carving out a name for themselves in Salford's murky underworld. But that didn't sit well with some of Manchester's more established villains. During the 1960s, 70s and early 80s, the Quality Street Gang were considered by some to be behind much of the major crime in Manchester. It was a claim the alleged gang members themselves, well respected, but notorious men like Jimmy Swords and Jimmy the Weed, deny, insisting instead that they were a loose collection of businessmen, acquaintances and drinking pals. Whatever the truth of the matter, it was alleged the QSG had their fingers in a fair few pies. An explosive court case in the 80s heard evidence from secret police dossiers that the QSG were professional criminals and suspected of being gun runners for the IRA. A large part of their interests involved controlling the doors at many of the city's pubs, clubs and casinos, places regularly frequented by Massey and Doyle and their associates. But, armed with plenty of cash from their ill-gotten gains, the cocky young upstarts weren't always the best behaved punters. Club owners started to ask Swords to do something about the Salford Lads running riot in their establishments. It was a hassle the QSG didn't need. It was, as Doyle says, simply a matter of time before things kicked off. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. As Massey and Doyle sat around on the night of Charles and Di's wedding, 6 or 7 tough-looking guys walked in the club and headed straight for the bar. I knew the possibility of them just being out celebrating the wedding was slim, writes Doyle in his autobiography Surviving the Madness. After a couple of minutes, one of them approached us. The guy barely said a word before putting a pint pot over one of his friend's head. It was a big mistake. Without saying anything more than a glance at each other, we jumped up in unison and met them halfway, with a full Salford onslaught. In the melee that followed, the man who launched the original attack was badly injured. As police rushed to the scene, Doyle managed to escape, but Massey and 2 others were arrested, charged with GBH and remanded in Strangeways. But the violence didn't end there. A series of tit-for-tat reprisals followed. The next weekend, Doyle says he was shot in the leg as he walked into town with his girlfriend. Around the same time, another of Salford Lads present at the brawl was hiding out in the women's toilets of a nearby pub, having allegedly been chased by the QSG. Then Doyle writes, a Ford Transit van was, accidentally, driven into the front door of one of the QSG's illegal drinking and gambling dens, just off Deansgate. A similar place had its doors blown off by a shotgun.
Have people attempted to take you out?
Many occasions, yeah. A few occasions I know people have tried to. I know people who will be watching this and are friends and plan to take me out. Think I don't know. I'm just laughing at them. I'm laughing. I shake their hands still. Because I know they ain't got the arse right because they know what fucking happened after. But I know I'm on him. And what they don't realise, I'm on yous. You know what I mean? I could have them all fucking sorted out now. But why? They're no threat to me because they're not going to do no harm to me because they ain't got the fucking balls.
How are people trying to have you taken out?
There's been quite a few occasions, you know. I like the occasions I don't really want to discuss. I can discuss a few of them. Like when we had a machine gun fight at us, you know, in outside my friend's house one day. You know, I think it was a Mac 10 was fired at us. Missed anyway. But I know, you know, them guys who fired that fucking machine gun, right? I'll tell you now, they just thought he was going to walk up, pull the trigger, and them guys was all going to drop dead like in a film. Didn't even hit anyone. You understand? Because it's not how you think it is when you go out to do that. People don't just die that easy.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you subscribe, you will be notified when we release a new video. It could be your firm we make a video about next, so don't miss out and hit the subscribe button. You can find me on Facebook or email me if you have a good story to tell. See you next time.